chance for you to look at our supporters and sponsors, and especially after what you've just heard, you might want to have a chat with some of the guys around the room. And then we're going to give you your chance to come back in after a cup of coffee and have a good old moan about different authorities or different issues that you have with any parts of the Searches world. And then we'll be all on our way home. So over to you then, Tom.
Awesome, thanks, Andrew. Thanks very much for inviting us along. So my name's Tom Lyes. I'm Key Relationship Manager at the Practical Vision Network. I work across the north of England, and in short what I do is help law firms protect themselves from fraud and cybercrime. And that's all the way down from small practices who are sole practitioners, all the way down to all the way up to the sort of top 10 conveyancers in the country. Who are the Practical Vision Network? Well, we're a group of companies who effectively try and solve pain points for lawyers. Our most common brand and what we're most well known for is Lawyer Checker, which is a series of risk products that help property departments and law firms in general. You also may have heard of our Today's publications. So we write and publish Today's Conveyancer, Today's Rules and Probate, and our newest one, Today's Legal Cyber Risk. What I want to talk to you about today is the challenges that law firms face when it comes to cybercrime. Ultimately, what that means to us as suppliers to the legal sector, and what actual opportunities that brings to further our relationships with our clients. So a little bit of context and background from Lawyer Checker's perspective. We were launched in 2013 to effectively help protect conveyancing departments from a loophole. So criminals around 2013 really started to target conveyancing, in particular the money-to-money between law firms aspect. As time has gone on, the way the criminals' behaviour now attacks those transactions has changed a little bit and evolved, and is a lot more varied than what it was back then. The reason why criminals picked up on this were obviously the value of money that's sort of exchanged every year. Conveyancing departments are regularly communicating from law firm to law firm. Thursdays and Fridays see high volumes of financial transactions. From a criminal perspective, it's a lot easier for an organised crime gang to affect and target the legal sector than it is to go and rob a bank. That's how criminals have evolved. Why would you go and take the risk of robbing a bank when you can sit behind a computer, have a team of people carrying out criminal activities to make that happen? So we launched something called Account and Entity Screen, which is a product I'll come on to a little bit later, which helps law firms when they send money to another law firm to verify that that money is going to the right place. We also help them when it comes to sending monies to individuals, because criminals have now also got onto the fact, well, law firms aren't just sending money to other law firms, they're sending money to consumers. And there's an element there that they can target. And recently we've helped a lot of law firms with regards to their email security, as email spoofing is a major problem. We'll share some examples of that. We're a Cyber Essentials Assessment Centre as well, which is something that's recommended by the government for all UK small businesses. We make up about 20% of the conveyancing transactions, so a search is done on 21.3% at the moment of all conveyancing transactions in the UK, whether that be law firms coming to us directly or with a number of the resellers that we work with. So you may well have heard of the term Friday afternoon fraud. Friday afternoon fraud is a very broad terminology, which effectively means conveyancing fraud at some point. There's a number of case studies here that are on the screen. We regularly see cases now make the national press where six-figure sums have gone missing. And we're also well aware there are a number of cases that don't make the national press where six-figure sums have gone missing because they've been underreported or not reported down proper channels. The one that I'm going to pick out and talk a little bit about is the one in the bottom left-hand corner, which is the Today's Conveyancer one, which first appeared in the Times in April. This was a law firm in London, and it was a high-value property that was being sold. The vendor was 70 years old. She had completed her client care letter, put it through the letterbox of the law firm. Within the client care letter was specific instructions as to where she wanted the proceeds of her sale to go. So transaction happened and went through. Day of completion, law firm receives an email. which comes in saying, can you pay a certain percentage of the proceeds to this bank account while keeping the initial money in the first bank account that I told you about. Fortunately, the law firm were a little bit wary, so they picked up the phone to the client. It was moving day though, so they couldn't really have a proper conversation with the client. So they made the informed decision that they were going to transfer the money. They obviously had a chat about it, so transferred the money. A day later, Mrs. McConnell makes the call and says, where's the rest of my money? I'm missing about 600,000 she's missing. So she was missing the money. The firm then obviously had to work backwards and work out what had actually happened. What had happened was that email that had landed into them had a 1-digit difference from the actual client's email address. Now, you may feel a little bit of sympathy for the law firm, and if you do, it's perfectly okay, but that shouldn't have been the only red flag. So the real red flag in this occasion from a law firm was that Mrs. McConnell was 70. That's not to say that 70-year-olds don't send emails, of course they do. But she hadn't had much email communication with them during the course of the transaction. So why all of a sudden would she send an email upon completion day? That's the type of education that's really important law firms understand and start to be able to pick out those type of things. What was very evident from that case, when you read the full article in the Times, is that the individual that actually committed the case was not the top of the food chain, so to speak. So this type of crime is not carried out by people in their bedrooms. This is organised crime gangs. If you watch Line of Duty, the phrase OCG will be very familiar to you. It is OCG activity. And the individual at the bottom of that food chain had actually made a mistake because he hadn't transferred the money across to the different parts of the world that he should have. He had actually transferred some to Nigeria and Ethiopia, but he hadn't moved the rest of it. That's how the police were able to catch it. It's very unusual that the money comes back. It's normally lost. Whether the firm gets that from their insurer depends on the processes that they had in place. Professional indemnity insurance are taking cyber very seriously now, and they're looking very closely at the procedures that firms have in place. There's a number of these stories that make the national press. We're almost seeing one every month or so now. What I want to do though is just focus in on some of these methods of attacks that criminals use, and hopefully this will be interesting, not just from understanding this from your client's perspective, but there should also be some takeaways here from your business and how you do things as well. So phishing is the most obvious method of attack. Again, that's quite a broad term. So that's when a target is contacted by email, by someone posing to be a legitimate individual or institution. They're trying to lure that individual into providing some sort of sensitive data, whether that be personally identifiable information, banking details, credit card details, passwords. It could be simply via a simple call to action via a link or an attachment. Here's some examples of phishing emails. They vary in their degrees of sophistication, like all levels of cybercrime really. You can see on the Microsoft example, your first port of call here is to always check the from address. So clearly on the from address of that email, it's very difficult it's very obvious to work out, sorry, that's not from Microsoft. Now, interestingly, someone raised a point to me the other day, which was a really good one, that it's sometimes very difficult on the phone, in particular if you've got certain models of iPhone, to be able to do that on the from address. So I would be wary about clicking links on phones when you're unsure of the destination of the email. Phishing is the telephone equivalent of phishing. It does happen. I know a firm this happened to in Manchester last summer. So I work with a consultant who sort of goes in and helps firms who are a little bit on the brink, shall we say. And this firm are on the brink of the basis that one of their senior partners had received a call from the bank relationship manager. That bank relationship manager basically sold him a story that he didn't want to ring the accounts department because he felt like they wouldn't have the authorization to do what he was going to ask them to do. He asked him to move money from one account to another. the managing partner moved that money. An hour later, he then spoke to his other partner who was a bit more suspicious of this. And then obviously they worked out, they transferred the money straight to a fraudster. They lost that money, they didn't get it back. And it was over £400,000 that was lost because of that. That probably also involved some social engineering. So don't think the criminal just picked up the phone to him and gave it a go. The criminal would have done their research there in terms of understanding the type of individual they were actually speaking to. He may well have been, if you look at the story in its context, he may well have been playing on the ego of that partner a little bit. We have smishing. This isn't hugely relevant in the legal sector yet, but I think it probably will be at one point. It's very, very relevant in the banking sector. Banks have had huge problems with this, whereby the criminals using text message. So you're more likely to open a text message and click on something than you are an email. There's a degree of sense as to why criminals do that. The reason I think it may well become more relevant in the legal industry as firms adopt more technology, so talking two-factor authentication or portals which have built-in SMS integration into them, it's going to be pretty easy for the criminals to start creating text impersonations. One of the most dangerous methods of attack though is push payment fraud. This is when scammers convince a customer to transfer money to them via an instant payment. This isn't just relevant to the legal industry. Anything where there's money involved, there's a risk of push payment fraud. The example I want to talk to you about push payment fraud is a couple of firms that I've worked with this year have had the same thing happen to them, whereby they have sent their bank details in an email in a PDF to the client to pay for the client to then pay their deposit funds. And what the criminal has done is they've intercepted the email at the client's end. They have then deleted that out of the client's inbox, changed the details within the PDF. PDFs are not secure, they're no more secure than writing it in the body of the email. They then managed to impersonate the law firm in question, resend that email back, so the client gets the email, it looks just like the email they were expecting to receive, and on both occasions they paid the money into the accounts in question. The lesson from that is around bank details in email. So you will all have different levels of invoicing and the way you bill your clients. I would be very careful as to what you include in emails around bank details. I wouldn't include bank details for people to pay you in an email, whether that be in a PDF or in the body of an email. If you're going to do that, for me it needs to be properly encrypted documentation that you're doing so. The reason being, you don't know who's at the other end, okay? Criminals, when they're sitting in networks, will be watching for certain words. Obviously, bank account, username, password are sort of buzzwords that they will be checking for and they will be looking for, and they will probably be able to impersonate your email addresses pretty simply. Push payment fraud has gone out of control within the accountancy sector for exactly that reason. And the people are regularly sending invoices and things like that, so they're having to rescue that industry with things like encrypted documents. CEO whaling fraud is when the CEO of a company gets impersonated to internal or external people. The example that we talked about there with push payment fraud focuses very much on the external element. However, the internal element is really where CEO whaling fraud comes in, where a director or senior person in that firm has their email address impersonated. The type of examples you see in law firms are whereby that email will go to an accounts department asking for a payment to be made, or HR department asking for payroll. In the 2017 SRA risk report, there was a really interesting story about a firm who this happened to. The HR person sent the details to the fraudster. She thought it was obviously the senior partner, and within 3 weeks there was a substantial trickle of people that were then victims of identity theft because of that. So that also focuses the point on it's not always just financial loss that the criminals are after. Data with regards to law firms is relevant too and is applicable. Also, sometimes criminals flex their muscles because they they can. The WhatsApp attack, which happened a few months ago, is a prime example of that. If you look at the consequences of that, it doesn't really look like they were, despite the initial rumours, necessarily trying to create a massive financial attack or steal hugely secure information. It looked like very much a case that they were doing it to flex their muscles as a way of warning. The biggest threat, though, that's faced by law firms at this present time is email cloning. So this is where the individual takes the exact email address of the law firm and sends an email impersonating to be them. So the example I gave you earlier with regards to when they sent the details via the PDF and the criminal then impersonated them, that's a great example of that. This is happening regularly. The good news is that there is protection for email cloning. So about 7 years ago, the likes of Google, Amazon and PayPal came together on the basis that this was starting to damage their brands, in that consumers didn't know whether to trust emails that were coming from them, and rightly so. So they developed a protocol that was ratified in 2015 called DMARC. And what DMARC does is it prevents email cloning and spoofing. One of the things we do at Lawyer Checker is we run a product that helps firms do this and protect their domains. One of the quite scary things about DMARC is it's a public record, so criminals will be looking at this type of thing and working out whether to go after the firm. If the firm have got that in place, there's a good chance that the criminal will just go and look for a much easier target. What does this mean in terms of a wider context within the legal sector? So this information is out of the SRA risk report from last autumn. 60% of law firms reported a security incident in 2018. Absolutely nonsense figure. That's way underreported. It'd be much, much closer to 90%. And the SRA are quite vocal in their opinion about facts as well. If we look at the SRA scam alerts, which is a really useful section on the SRA website that law firms can use, it basically shows any attempt to either impersonate the firm, an individual at the particular firm, or, for example, their website. These paint a really interesting picture over the last 3 months. So inheritance and entitlement to money scams bizarrely still exist. So that's where we're talking about the Nigerian prince. There have been 12 of those in the last 3 months. Bogus websites is quite high. That's 17. Bogus websites is a route that criminals have used. We caught one out last year by working with a Bold Legal Group. One of the things we do in our Lawyer Checker search is Google Street View search, and we actually managed to catch out a bogus firm last year with this. Although that number says 17, it's not as big a threat as that, in that from a criminal perspective, to be able to use a bogus website to influence a transaction is just a small chunk of that criminal journey. They have to do a lot more than just a bogus website. The real key figure is the emails, phishing and malware, which is 29 of those in the last 3 months. This is where criminals are focusing their attention at the moment around law firms, and this is backed up by last year's SRA risk report, where 72% of all the cybercrime reports to the SRA were made up of what we call email modification fraud. If you look at 2017's numbers, they were a lot closer to 32%. So that's a big jump and a big change in the way that criminals have started to work and become more sophisticated. I mentioned the WhatsApp attack a little bit briefly earlier on. It's not just the legal sector where cybercrime is at the top of people's agendas. All these attacks on these brands have happened in the last few years. Dixon's Carphone Warehouse one where 5.9 million payment cards were stolen. There's the NHS ransomware virus, which happened about 18 months ago now, where 16 NHS organisations had the system shut down. And the surprising thing is none of these are hugely sophisticated attacks. They're all fairly low levels of sophistication. The way that conveyancing fraud has evolved though is really interesting. So in the initial period where this became a real issue, back when we started in 2013, it was all about the criminal targeting law firm to law firm. So trying to impersonate to get that law firm to transfer funds to what they believed was a legitimate law firm, when in fact it was a criminal. To begin with, that usually involved low-level sophistication, so emails that didn't match, for example, phone calls that were suspicious. As time has gone on, that has evolved greatly. So now we're seeing tricky examples for law firms to deal with, whereby the exact email address is being impersonated. So you've got to be really careful about what you're dealing with and what you're communicating with via email. As I also alluded to, they also cottoned on a couple of years ago that when you send monies to consumers, this is a risk as well. So a prime example of this is a case study which came out in the Telegraph in January. It was a wills and probate firm in Birmingham. The fraud happened on the payment of an IPSA. So it was an administration of an estate. What had happened was the criminal had emailed in saying, please can you pay the money to this account? Law firm just went ahead and paid the money. The lesson for law firms here is that they must be able to identify a process and verify whenever they're sending money, whether that be to another law firm or an individual. It's not acceptable now just to say that law firm we deal with are local, we know everything about them. Because the chances are nobody can't remember their bank details. Would they know if a member of the conveyancing team had their email impersonated within the last month? Are they regularly looking at their salary scam alerts? Unlikely. And also when sending monies to consumers, just because someone sits in front of you with their bank statement, it doesn't mean that's their bank statement, or it doesn't necessarily mean that the bank details they've given you actually belong to them. And that's really where sort of lawyer checker then fits into law firms' risk management processes. So our core product when we help firms when sending money to law firms is a transit entity screen. And this effectively has two benefits to the law firm. Number one, it gives them some clarity and some comfort that where they're sending that money, they have a clear and evidenceable process that bank account belongs to that law firm in question. And number two, it also gives them enhanced due diligence. So law firms regulators are asking more of them around this area now, in particular things like CQS and like Excel. So law firms have to do checks on the other conveyancers. Now, people on the front line don't necessarily know what they're actually checking for. If you ask the standard conveyancer to go ahead and do risk checks on the other law firm, and you ask 10 of those, you would probably get 10 different answers. People would look at different things. They wouldn't necessarily know the key red flags in which to look out for, and that's why so many firms use Lawyer Checker to be able to give their teams that level of comfort. We check about 16 different entities within our database when we do the search. I kind of talked about the Google Street keyword earlier, which is quite interesting. So we try and paint a really clear picture to the firm about where they're sending that money. They have a clear and evidenceable PDF result. If we're in any doubt, so when they enter the information to make the search, we go away and produce a further research report for them. And the idea of the further research report is we can paint a really clear picture as to why that result has turned out to be what it is, so the firm can make an informed decision off the back of that, depending on what the result is. We would recommend that the firm does a lawyer checker search every time they send money to another law firm. There's a significant amount of the top 100 conveyancing firms in the country that do this. We would also encourage them to do it as early as possible. So firms are now in the habit of being able to do this early. So previously what you used to find is firms would hold on to the bank details until upon requisitions of title. Now they're actually sending those early because they understand the reasons as to why this needs to be done early. And we also encourage them to do it before exchange, so if anything does happen, they can easily sort this out. And to help with that, we offer a free refresh. So if there's a big gap from when they've done the search initially to the point which the money is moving, they can refresh to see if anything has actually changed. In terms of objections that we face, we only work with local firms. I think I kind of covered that a couple of minutes ago. Just because a firm is working with a local firm, that doesn't mean it makes the transaction any more less adverse to risk. In fact, In fact, if you look at historic cases, it probably makes it more reverse to risk. And I think with the way that conveyancing is much more educated around this area now, it's unlikely that a criminal would target money moving from Manchester to Cornwall, because the firm in Manchester who's moving the money is actually probably very cautious about that transaction. And they're far more likely to do Norwich to Norwich, for example, where there may be a degree of complacency in the transaction. Firms keeping safe lists is a big no-no. Insurers would hit the wall if they found out firms were keeping safe lists. It's a dangerous thing to do. How secure is a safe list? Ultimately, you don't really know. You don't know who's sitting in the background of networks. There's also a free tool which is called Lender Exchange that some firms will use. That's not a live data like Lawyer Checker is. That's just a snapshot of whenever the firm signed up to Lender Exchange. Lawyer Checker is real-time live risk management information. Some people will say our margins are really tight. Our RRP is £10 plus VAT. And so people say we can't afford to put that in our margins. You can recharge Lawyer Checker to clients. Our wording is approved by the SRA, and the SRA are a big fan of Lawyer Checker. I've never known a law firm explain why they use Lawyer Checker to a customer, and that customer turn around and say, don't protect my money. We've kind of hinted about the regulators really focusing more on this. So big changes in CQS this year in terms of what's being asked of firms, more from an evidenceable side of things, and being able to prove that they're doing things and they have procedures. It's really important that firms are doing the same thing throughout. What you don't want is in property departments, one person doing one thing, one person doing another. That's why the implementation of Lawyer Checker can really sort of align that quite nicely. Cyber Essentials is also talked about in both Excel and CQS for the first time this year, and quite rightly, it's strongly recommended that law firms implement that. Cyber Essentials is something that's born out of the National Cyber Security Centre, which has formed itself out of GCHQ about 4 years ago. It's cyber accreditation that really looks at the real basic elements of cyber security and make sure you've got the basics protected, and that will protect businesses against about 60% of low to medium level cyber attacks. It's highly recommended. We're an assessment centre for that. We started doing that in January. We've already sort of assessed 75 firms to date. What's in it for you as potential resellers of Lawyer Checker? Well, cybercrime and fraud are topical subjects. It will help you engage you with your clients. It creates a way for you to talk to your clients about something that should be on the top of their agenda. We're a well-known brand. People trust and respect the education work we do across the sector. We have one of the highest sign-up rates to webinars across the sector in terms of some of the education that we do, and we can support you in many different ways, whether that be delivering training to a firm, educating staff and adding value to your service. Lawyer Checker is a simple and cost-effective product which does provide huge protection. From a financial point of view, there's a little bit in it for you, in that we discount our price to resellers, so we can integrate with things like ordering platforms. Lawyer Checker can also be done manually through resellers, and we pay a £50 referral fee for Cyber Essentials referrals as well. That's pretty much it from me in terms of sort of cybercrime. Hopefully you found that sort of quite interesting, and it's given you a few things you can take away into your own business. In particular, like that I mentioned, I included bank details and emails, and also giving you a much better understanding as to where this fits with law firms and how we can hopefully create a relationship and help you work with your customers. Thanks very much.